right. I don't think I'm going to have a very long talk, but I still want to go deep into styles. I noticed that on the forum there were some questions that actually a lot of styles questions. So I thought let's go back to the fundamentals of styles. So styles, when we're talking about styles, the CSS, which is cascading style sheet. And it works on the selectors in your HTML. And that's a very important distinction. So let's go to HTML first. HTML, it's a hypertext markup language which was created by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN. It's based on another standard. And there are about 118 elements defined currently in the HTML standard. You won't need to know all of them. You probably need to know only 20 to 25 of those tags for regular use. But as you can see here, we're talking about elements and we're talking about tags. So what is the difference here? An element is really like we got here a paragraph, text at the end of the paragraph. That whole thing is an element. And then with the P is the tag. And a tag is a selector in CSS. Or can be used as a selector in CSS. So when we're talking about elements and tags, sometimes they're sort of intermingled, but when we're really talking about an element, that's like the whole block of the element. Actually, there can be other tags inside that element as well, which is part of the element. So let's talk about semantic HTML. What is semantic HTML? It's HTML tags that have a meaning behind them. And they also help with accessibility. Browsers will interpret them in a certain way. Screen readers, other things that know how to work with those tags. They have a meaning. And a lot of times they also have a default styling in your browser. So even if you don't apply any styles, they already have a style. So most used one of course are the headers, the H1 all the way to 6. It's kind of the same thing that you use like in a Word document or Google Docs. It's a way to give an outline to your document, and it's also used in a lot of times as for the table of contents. So again, it has a meaning. And really, your document, your page, should only have one H1 because you should only have one primary header. Anything else are subheaders. Although now the standard does allow for multiple H1s, but a lot of the browsers really complain about if you have more than one H1 in your browser. Again, I'm talking about accessibility here. P tag, that's a paragraph. We got the unordered list, the ordered list, and then a list has list items. They all have a meaning, and they also get formatted in a certain way by the browser. The img tag is for the image, and you can actually wrap an image in a figure tag, maybe with some other information, and usually also add a vig caption with the caption text on it, and that whole block is then considered the figure. Again, so that has meaning for accessibility. In HTML, we also have a couple of new tags that provide some structural context. So we got a heading, we got a main, which is the main part of your page, and we got a footer. That's usually the structure of a page. And now we have tags for that. And then we have a section, article, and nav for navigation. Usually you have one nav in your page, but you can also have sub-navs or little other lists where you have a navigation in there. You can have sections in an article as well, but an article in an article doesn't make any sense. So text with no meaning is the div, which stands for division. And it's really used to organize your content and some styles on it. So div is really a meaningless thing. It's just a way to structure things, essentially. So then on the tags, you can put attributes. And we have global attributes and we have specific attributes. Global attributes can be used on any of the HTML elements. So let's take a look at a couple of those. We've got the ID, global attributes. Since it's an ID, an identifier that should be unique within your page. And you give it a unique name. And you can have a class. And the class and ID are selectors for your CSS. Other attributes, there are way more than this, but you got dir for direction, for right to text, so right to left text and left to right for like Hebrew and Arabic. And which you can actually apply on one element, and only that part will be left to right or right to left. And otherwise, it uses the browser or system settings. And some other tag that actually Servoy also uses is the data attribute, because we got the data target attribute in our in a couple of our Servoy elements. So, but you can use that yourself. You can define it yourself, and it's then usually used with in combination with JavaScript. But you can also use it for as a selector for style. So specific attributes that cannot be applied on everything is the href, which is the hypertext reference. So you could put an outbound link to like another page or another site. But you can also link to an ID on your page, and then it's sort of a jump to go-to page reference. And the browser will automatically scroll as well if it's not in viewport. So that's a nice way to apply some navigation within your page. And another attribute is rels, which stands for a relation, and that's usually used in like a link tags, like which you have in your header, which is a meta tag.
Is it relation or relative?
It's relation. Yeah. Yeah. Now it's like here you say it's a link with an href with a URL in it, and what is the link? It's a style sheet. So that's how you say relation is a style sheet. There are some other specific attributes which are like for the form elements, usually for input, where you can say, okay, this, we got a type of an input which is text, password, and if you type in your password, you only see bullets. Email, then it actually validates if it's an email address. Type color gives you a color picker automatically, so the browser does that. You can also say type date, and you get a date picker automatically, and that's all built into the browser. It's part of the spec. Then we also have the ARIA attributes and roles, and again, this is for really for accessibility, which I mean there are many tags for that, or attributes, but you usually use something like ARIA label and sort of name something. So in a screen reader, you know that okay, this thing means this. Like this, here's my main navigation. And you can find more information on that link there. So let's talk about some CSS concepts. One of them is inheritance, which is actually a really cool one, a really important one. If we have a little HTML like this with a body, and inside the body we got an h1 tag and a paragraph, and underneath we got the CSS that we apply on the selector body, then it will inherit, like the other tags, the h1 and the p tag will inherit the style of the body automatically, because it's within the hierarchy. These are children of the body. So hierarchy defines the inheritance. So you don't have to create styles for every tag within that body. So that's a very important concept in CSS. There's only one exception. If you got a button or an input or text area or select, that won't inherit. So you have to specify that specifically. For example, if you want to inherit the font, then you need to add those selectors there and then say font inherit. And then it will actually, you force it to inherit the font from the parent, essentially. Whatever was declared there. So that might bite you at some time that you forget, it's like why my input and my buttons are not styled. That's because of this. Cascade is also another important concept in CSS. So if we have here a paragraph with a class, color accent, and we create a style sheet with a color accent, and we got a whole bunch of more styles, and at the end we add another color accent. Here we say the color is green, here we say the color is gray. Then the last one wins. Right, so the one at the bottom will override the color green. So, and that you might run in that a couple of times. That you find out like, oops, why is this style not being applied? And it turned out that it was already being overwritten by another style. So what you can do then is simply go into the web browser and open up an inspector. And then you can see that, for example, here, the demo.css, on line 10, the background color is crossed out. And the line 19 above there, that's the one that is active. So this will tell you immediately, like, okay, which one takes precedent here. So what you should do is you put your more generic selectors like body and main and h1 and all that stuff at the top of your style sheet, and then the more specific selectors, the classes, you want to put that at the bottom that override stuff from like those more generic selectors. Also, another thing is that if you have, for example, font where you put in font family, you can add more than one font. And there, the cascade applies there as well. So if the first font is not on your system, it will try the second one, it will try the third one. Preferably then, if you got sort of like a serif font, you can say, okay, in the end, give me a serif font. So serif and sans serif are sort of generic font names. Where it will simply take a serif or non-serif font from your system. But you probably want to specify them specifically so you have more control of them. Specificity, that's a difficult word. Very important concept in CSS, and it's most likely the one that bites you the most. Specificity works like all your selectors have a certain importance, So you have your element selectors, your class selectors, and your ID selectors. And if you have an ID selector, that overrules any class selectors, and a class selectors overrules any element selectors. So if you have like a P for a paragraph, and you got on the paragraph you got a class set, then the class setting will override, will use the properties and not the element class that you have defined. So it will pick your class first over your element style. And the same thing if you have an ID class or ID style set up, and you have also a class on there somewhere, then the ID takes precedent. So that's the specificity of the selectors. So so that's also a reason where you then apply styles and say, why doesn't it work? Because there's already maybe an ID or a class selector that sets that font or sets that width or the size or whatever, and you're doing it on an element style and it's not working. So that's something you have to be aware of. It's like the specificity of your selector. It also means that the order of in your style sheet, if you have like a P style for the paragraph at the bottom of your style sheet, you got a class style at the top, it will use the one at the top. So the cascade doesn't apply there because the ID selector or the class selector is more important than the element selector. Of course, you can boost the specificity using descendant. I see I write that wrong. Descendant selectors. So you can say here, I've got here a class, and then in this case a element that will overrule any other things, because the class makes it more specific. There's also a way of, and that's really a sort of a last resort, to really say, no, really use this specific style, or actually this style property. And that's using the exclamation point important. But once you start to go down that route, then if you use it too much, it's going to be world of words, because who's going to win at the end? If everything is important, then it's not going to work. Okay, the box model is also an interesting concept, and especially when you want to have everything pixel perfect, your layout shouldn't wobble and all stuff. So in HTML or CSS, we have three properties: the margin, the border, and the spacing, and they all have an effect on the box, essentially. It's, so you got your context, which is here the blue box. You can apply some padding. You can put a border around it. So the padding gives you a little bit of a white space between your content and your border. And then the margin, you can say, okay, give me some white space around that border from any other content. So now apply width on this. Where should it apply on? By default, it applies on the blue box. So if you say, okay, the blue box is 400 pixels wide, and you add padding of 5 pixels, a border of 2 pixels, and maybe some margin of 25 pixels, then everything starts to wobble. But you said, well, it should be 400 pixels, right? But the thing is it uses the content box sizing property by default, so it applies on the content. So you can say, and it's good practice to put this at the top of your style sheet. Say, select everything with just the asterisks. Select everything with the pseudo selector anyway. Pseudo selector before and after, and says box sizing is border box. Then your width will apply to the outer sort of where the margin ends essentially. So that gives you way more control on the positioning of your element and therefore your layout. Because sometimes it's just you put a border around it, 1 pixel, and you say, okay, this has to be 400 pixels, and now you get 402, right? And suddenly something will break off and start shifting in your layout. And by saying, okay, use border sizing, border box, you know exactly this whole thing is going to be 400 pixels.
But then don't you want to do it on the margin?
Sorry?
Don't you want to then say it's on the margin,
Yeah.
not on the border?
The border
whole
box.
element,
I think. I think you're right. It might be on the border. No, I think.
the margin was outside the border.
No, I think it applies. No, it applies on all three, including the context.
Yeah, no, but
No, it doesn't include the margin.
it's not.
It does not include margin.
No, border and padding.
All right. Okay, I'll stand corrected. There you go.
Can you then say margin box?
Sorry.
Can you make it margin box?
No, there is no margin.
No, there is no margin box.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, there are only two properties, and well, inherit and others, but yeah. So there are a lot of units being used in CSS, and we've got some. It's usually used for length, like width and height and stuff like that. So we've got some absolute lengths, centimeters, millimeters, inches, pixels, points, and picos. Pixels, points, points and picos are usually used with fonts. And these absolute lengths, you probably use it for when you do printing or something, or something like that. So you make a style sheet that says, okay, this is just for print, because well, on a web page, you're probably not going to say, okay, I want this thing 2 centimeters long. So those are the absolute lengths, and you got your relative lengths. We've got a whole bunch of them. EM is an interesting one. It's a relative to the font size of an element. So if you already have an element that has a font, then you can say, okay, anything like a parent element has a font size, then the child element, where you use the EM, says, okay, I want 1.25 of the size of my parent font. So it's a relative size, essentially. If you use REM, which is probably the one that you want to use the most, it says, okay, what's it's the relative size from the page font, so the base font of your page. So so if you have a font size set on your body, for example, and you get a whole bunch of other elements in there with other styles, and it says, okay, we got 2 REM, 1.25 REM, etc. Then they don't influence, and you have one that says EM. Then changing one of the parent elements suddenly change that element as well. You might not want that. So if you always go from the base, the root element size, then everything you got some more control over that. So you get some rarely used units. But the most important ones, or most interesting ones, are the viewports, the width and the height that you might want to use, and you can also get sort of the min and max of that as well. And probably one of the units that you use the most is percentage, just to give me like 25% of a page or something like that. So those are the relative lengths. There are actually also other units that are used more for like the newer styles, like for grid and flexbox, where they have like fractions, FR, where they simply say, okay, this is one fraction or two fractions of my width. So FR is then also a unit. That's specifically for like grid and flexbox, which we're not going to cover. So CSS classes, they cannot start with a number. So if you do dot one something, that's an invalid class name. Same thing with IDs. So hashtag one and then whatever number or text is invalid, and that style will simply not apply. Actually, it will break your style sheet. So so you start with a period, my class, in your style sheet. Then you can also say the element selector P dot my class. Then you say, okay, give me all the paragraph tags that have the class my class. So this is a more specific selector that says, okay, I might have my class on other tags as well, but this style is only for the P tag with this class name. If you put a space between the P and the dot class, then that's a descendant selector. This is correctly spelled. So here we got the P tag, and within that element, we got an H2 class, or H2 element, and some text, and the H2 element has the class my class. So that style selector here, P space my class, that says, okay, give me apply this style on the my class. In this case, it's header, because we don't specify that, simply this style, but it has to be in a paragraph. So only then it will be applied. So that's a descendant selector, gives you more specificity to apply that style. Then we have pseudo classes, and a pseudo class is usually used, or is used to define a special state of an element. So you hover over something, or there's some unvisited links, or it gets the focus. Then you can style that using this syntax. So it's in this case it's the anchor tag, where you say, okay, an unvisited link, then the colon link is the pseudo class applied on the A tag, and an A and a colon visited is when it's visited. Sometimes you want to, I mean, it actually does that by default already. So there's an easy way to override the browser default. Mouse overs, you do a colon hover and a selected link, and so when it's clicked, it's a column active. So the pseudo classes are defined by one column. There's some newer pseudo classes, very interesting. They're more functions really, but it's a pseudo class where you can sort of reduce your typing in your style sheet. Example, take the top part where we get an example 1 H3, example 4, example 1 H4, example A. They all those elements, or all those selectors, need to have the color red. So you're repeating yourself a lot here. Example 1, example 1, example 1. So you can use the is pseudo class. Say dot example space colon is. And then you put in all the selectors in that list there, and then you say, okay, this is red. So this is a nice new way of writing your classes. Keeps it also more readable. It's fairly new. I think it's from 2022, but most browsers already support it. So it's picked up pretty good.
The Servoy.
Huh?
Does Servoy support it in?
Well, I mean, it's not about Servoy in this case. It's about the browser, about the browser engine, the renderer, and all the major browsers support it. There's a pseudo class where, and it's sort of the same, works sort of the same thing as the is statement. The only difference is it has no specificity whatsoever. So it has no extra weight to make to say, okay, use this style. So so if there's another style where you say example 1 space h3, that gets overruled, or that overrules this style essentially, has a higher specificity. So again, specificity is the stuff that gets that bites you the most. But this is sort of well, same version as is, but no specificity whatsoever. And then there's also has, and which is an interesting one because you always have a selector, and then that applies to that element. But in this case, you say, okay, I want to select the parent of this element. So this is the parent selector. So you can say example 1 has image. Then it actually gets applied not on the image, well, yeah, you say, yeah, it doesn't apply on the image, but if the element has an image tag inside that element, so in the hierarchy, then it picks then it's applied to the parent. So, which is different than example ing with that would be applied to the image. In this case, you say no, it's applied to the parent where that image lies within, essentially. So, there's an interesting, very powerful tag if there's need for that. So then we got pseudo elements. So we're talking about pseudo classes. Now these are pseudo elements. So pseudo elements is used to style specific parts of an element. It uses a double colon, although in the beginning of the spec it was actually defined with a single colon, but then later in the third iteration, I think it was, they said no, it should be more distinct from the pseudo classes, so it should be double colon. Although all the browsers work also with the single colon, so you can use the single colon, it will just work. So here you can say again a paragraph before and have some styles, and then you need to also put in the property content, because the style will insert some content in your element, and in this case it will insert it before your content. So it doesn't insert it before the tag. It puts it inside, but before your content. So that's what the pseudo element colon before does, and of course there's also an after for that. So it puts it behind your content or underneath your content. So that's not even content that's inside your HTML or data, whatever. It's defined in your style sheet using the content property.
So what's the use case for that?
For like little icons and other things to add in front of like text or something. Yeah. Yeah. So you can simply say, okay, got here a button with a label, but I want to have a little icon in front of it. And then you use the before or after if you want to have it behind it. Before and after does not work on an image tag, because image tag is kind of a weird one, because effectively an image tag gets replaced by the image. So the image is the content. So where should the before and after go in? I mean, it should then be in binary. So that doesn't work. So it only works on effectively text. So no images. There's some other pseudo elements, pretty self-explanatory. First line, so it gets applied on the first line of your text. So if there's a break, then it doesn't apply there. So only on the first line. First letter, so you can style the first letter of your text within your element. Marker, so if you got like a list, an ordered list or a word list, you get those bullets and whatever. Then you can apply the pseudo element, what we call a marker, and style them that way. And you can also style the selection. So if someone selects text, then that you can style. So CSS also has a lot of functions that you can apply to your properties. So here are some of them. You can return the value of an attribute, like the data attribute, for example, and apply that into your style. Calc, so you can do some calculations in your style sheet. Give me the max of something or the min of something. You can, instead of doing hexadecimal color codes, you can use simply the 0 to 255 values in an RGB function. So red, green, and blue. And RGBA, then you also add an alpha channel, so you can add transparency to that as well, which can be nice. And var is also something that's being used a lot to add a variable to your property, a variable sort of defined somewhere, so you don't have to repeat yourself because it's just a variable throughout your style sheet. Media queries, usually used for responsive design. So the media queries give you a way to apply CSS only when the browser or device environment matches the rule that you specify. So let's say, so this is the syntax, your media, you say the media type, and the media type can be all, print and screen. And then you have also the option to provide your rule, and then you put in your rules. So, for example, for print, you simply say, okay, I've got here a specific style sheet or style classes that need to be applied when you print. So that you can use the millimeters and centimeters and inches units, for example. So here you can have multiple selectors in there, or style classes within that print block, essentially. So that then, so within your style sheet, you can have a print style sheet and maybe a screen style sheet. But if you use it for really responsive design, then you're going to put in criteria like min width, 300 pixels, 320 pixels. So when the width of your window or your viewport is a minimum of 320, then these styles apply. And you can have another media tag in there that says, okay, if it's smaller than 900 something, then do this. So that's why you have your responsive design. So you got your cutoffs essentially that you define here in the criteria, in the media query. And then those styles will apply. So of course you can start with a base style sheet, which is like usually desktop, and then create some media queries to apply for other screen formats. Grid and Flexbox doesn't really need media queries because to be responsive, because it really works with, like I said, fractions. So it says, okay, I've got here a grid and I want 3 columns, so that's fraction 1, fraction 2. So 1, fraction 1, fraction 1, fraction gives me 3 columns, however you size it. With Flexbox, there are some other ways as well that actually controls the flow. So you don't really need media queries for that. So those are interesting ways of providing some responsiveness to your application. Animations, that can be done a lot with animation, and let me show you some examples of really advanced stuff, really. So here I'm at CodePen. There are a bunch of examples there that people made and put online, and all the source is available here. So if I reload this, then it does all this without JavaScript. This is pure CSS. So all that is defined here. As you can see here, there's no JavaScript here defined. So pretty powerful stuff. Here's another one. If I reload this, then you actually see some animations here. It's all 3D. It's on a plane. Suddenly, a message comes in here. Actually, this whole phone is being drawn by StyleSheet, by CSS. It's pretty amazing how they did that. I don't think they use SVG. So yeah, it's a really powerful language to put some graphics on your screen here. This is a funny one, little MacBook Air that has some animation. Again, no JavaScript here. This is all CSS. There's not really stuff that you would put in your application, but you can have some more sliders and other things that animate just using CSS, and you don't need JavaScript for that. Here we got a horse. Again, no JavaScript, and they even added a way. They have a toggle in here. Again, no JavaScript. CSS toggle that kind of shows it how it's being done. So these are all diffs that have been styled and then animated and all the stuff, including the little dust here. They even then slow the animation down. Really amazing stuff that they did here. But yeah, it is possible if you got no time in your hands whatsoever. Then you can do stuff like that. It allows you to do that. This is also a cool one. This is Solar System Explorer. So I can go here to Venus with some animation. Let's go all the way to Pluto here, which I guess it's no longer a planet, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool. And again, there's no JavaScript here. This is all done with CSS. Pretty amazing. Earth? Earth is here.
It's not flat. How do you know?
It's a pale blue dot, right? Yeah, I know. And here, this is also pretty cool with all the shades. It's pretty amazing how they did this. I mean, it's very soft shading and all the stuff, and like there's no JavaScript, no SVG. It's all CSS. Pretty amazing. So animations, yeah, pretty powerful stuff that you can do just with CSS. I really can I mean, yeah, I would advise you to go to this YouTube channel from Kevin Powell. He has really very instructive videos, very easy to follow. He does a lot of live coding to show it and explains really well. I picked out 2 of his videos on his channel about grid and about Flexbox, but he has so much videos. I think he has like for 5 years worth of videos that he put up over the past 5 years or more. So yeah, Kevin is a really good teacher in that sense to explain HTML and CSS and yeah, give you the basics. Any questions? Are we in time? Yes.
Where, yeah, guys, videos about CSS in general or about the animation?
About HTML and CSS in general, so he goes into specifics per video, or he says, okay, this is the beginner's guide, or this is more advanced, or to do specific things. So if you're a beginner, you can start there. If you're more experienced, you can still learn there as well with other videos. Yeah, can highly recommend that. Oh, by the way, I will provide slides, so probably I'm going to put it somewhere there for the download. So, any other questions? All right. Okay, then that's the end. I guess we're in time.